Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Luke Schnofsky, and you're now part of the 1000 Minutes of Listening podcast, rated 5 stars on iTunes by Christian Zolinski. He says, I can't wait to listen to another entry. Thank you, Christian. I appreciate it. Now, the topic for this entry is magical realism. What is it? How does it relate to 100 years of solitude? And how does it relate to real life? Because frankly, I think that we have a lot to discuss on that regard. Well, first of all, I'd like to address what it even is. Now, magical realism is simply the intertwining of both fact and fiction. Say, for example, a dream. A dream is a lot like a magical realism type deal because it takes a lot from real life. A lot of inspiration comes through it. You blend in your own real personal experiences and whatnot with pure fiction, such as flying dinosaurs and dragons and purple trees, although I'm sure that's a real thing. Nonetheless, it's simply a nice little conglomeration of the two, fact and fiction, world and other world. And somewhere where we can see a lot of magical realism, in fact, something that is built upon magical realism, is the novel 100 Years of Solitude. Now, you may be wondering, if you haven't read the book, what exactly is so special about 100 Years of Solitude? Well, to be frank, 100 Years of Solitude tells a very rather sad and long-winded story about the town of Macondo, as previously mentioned on a previous entry in the podcast. But part of what makes it so special, this novel, is that it tells a completely fraudulent tale, fraudulent in a good sense, not like a fraud, in a very believable light. Now, you have to understand, most of the things in this book aren't realistic to any degree. Many people don't act like they ever would, such as the gypsy, the wonderful gypsy of Macondo. Gypsies in real life don't have magic unless they're just hiding it from the government, or at least not to my knowledge. However, in Macondo they do. Yet, like mentioned, what makes this so special, this book, is how believable it is, how invested you become in this somewhat relatable story. Now, there's not really much to directly relate to. I mean, I don't assume normal person partakes in many of the activities that happen in Macondo, such as, to put it bluntly, their incestuous relationships with their significant others. Yet, in the end, there's some very particular parallels I'd like to draw together. I mean, just to list one off the top of my head. For instance, the gypsy of Macondo, when he arrives back at the town after many a moon away, and everybody is enshrined in this insomnia plague, he brings with him a cure, an antidote, if you will, to the cure. Now, in this novel, you could assume this cure is a little bubbly potion. Yet, then you really think back to reality. Don't we have magical cures for illnesses as well? And I kind of find that to be a little bit of a magical realism thing in our own little world, to be quite honest. Because when you look at some of the stuff these researchers are doing, it's fascinating the way they put together cures to different diseases. Most prominently in our today's culture and society, viral infections, which are actually very fascinating on how they do this. The way they cure viruses in people, really, is that they take a viral pathogen, or really a sample of this viral pathogen, strip it of all its proteins and whatnot that would, in fact, alter our human cells. This is just to my knowledge how this whole process works. And then once it's injected to our body through this solution in the syringe, well, there's also other ways. I believe there's some edible supplements you could take for certain viral infections. Nonetheless, when the body's immune system picks this stuff up, picks these dead, really viruses up, if you want to call them dead, since they are a big debate point for, researchers whether or not these things are alive or not. Once our body picks these up, it grows almost awareness to it, if you will. It builds up its immune system against this pathogen, so next time it encounters it, it can kill it much more quickly. And that alone to me is quite amazing, how we're able to manipulate our world at such a small level. I mean, there's currently images of atoms existing in our world. In fact, I believe some researchers made a video, like a small little stop motion animation video, on an atomic scale. They did this by simply rearranging atoms on I suppose, a plate or something of the sorts. And it actually like tells the story of a boy with a ball. It's very interesting. I recommend Googling it. Simply just Google stop motion animation atoms and it'll come up. It's fascinating, just the degree to some of these things. But this isn't even the most interesting idea of magical realism and how it works, really, in our real world. Some things that are just seem so outlandish yet so real. All you really have to do is look at ancient civilizations. I mean, ancient Egyptian civilization, that's a really big one. Researchers still today are arguing about this. For instance, the pyramids of Giza. Now, nobody knows exactly how these pyramids were made. Many think that they were actually carved out of a mountain. Many others think that they were built through slave labor, which seems to be the most leading conclusion. Yet when you look at the facts, it doesn't exactly line up. In fact, if they were built through slave labor, that would mean that they'd have to extract these ginormous, well, sandstone bricks out of somewhere. And the closest place to have extracted those from was identified as a quarry over 200 miles away from the site of the pyramids. 200 miles. That means that somehow these giant stones had to be dragged for 200 miles by a group of humans. To give you an idea, going 55 on a highway, you'd be driving for a damn sight close to 4 hours before you reach your destination. Now imagine walking that and how long that would take. That's already quite a hefty deal. And now you're dragging stones in the heat. I mean, frankly, that's quite amazing to me. I don't know how it would work, um, but it's truly incredible. Some have proposed they had wagons back then. That's been disproven. Nonetheless, that's just by itself amazing. And then you look at some of the hieroglyphs the ancient Egyptians made. There's, if you were to Google it, you can. There are some very odd and very telling hieroglyphs that the ancient Egyptians have inscribed. And one in particular, in fact, catches my attention the most. It shows an ancient Egyptian man or woman looking through what appears to be a ginormous telescope into the stars. Now, if you ever studied the ancient Egyptian civilizations, which I'm sure many of you listening have, if you haven't, definitely research it. It's fascinating, the civilizations and the ancient technologies they used. You will know that they didn't have telescopes, like magnifying scopes back then, to look at the stars. Simply, they recorded everything, the shifting stars and motions in the sky, uh, through their regular eyesight. They didn't enhance it anyway. Then why is there a depiction of a man looking through a telescope? Or some device clearly unknown to us right now as to what it is? And frankly, nobody knows. I mean, researchers are still actually actively asking themselves what this thing is. Now, that's just like one small example. I'm not going to go out there and say aliens, since, well, we don't have necessary proof that such a thing exists, at least not to the public's knowledge. Yet, just the way those ancient Egyptian civilizations, um, I guess, existed is quite magical in my eyes. The fact that they're out there doing these ginormous projects and such, and it's just quite interesting. I think another actually interesting little tidbit about ancient civilizations was the Romans. It was discovered had this one device called, and forgive me, I mispronounced this, the Antikythera device. I believe that's how it's called. Antikythera device. Now you can Google it. It's spelled Antikythera. Kythera device. It's this beautiful amalgamation of cogs and gears that was unearthed at a burial site or ecological dig, and it's a more complicated device than we ever thought that the ancient Romans or the Greeks could have ever created. In fact, researchers today still don't know exactly how it works. However, this is a very real piece of finding. Now, we believe that it was used by sailors as a navigational device. However, this would have been such a well held secret from normal sailors. This must have been an executive sailor thing, that it's almost entirely undocumented. To this day, we're still working on what it is exactly, like how it works. And you can, I believe, you can buy replicas of it, or at least pretty ones, kind of fantasized ones, for well, pretty penny, a hefty sum, since this is a rather large device. Looks very much like the interior workings of a modern, mind you, modern clock. We're talking about thousands of years ago. However, that's just another little real example of magical realism I'd like to bring up. In fact, I can bring up an example of magical realism in our real world that has eluded us for so long that only until a few decades ago we really did believe this was just magical realism. In fact, I'm talking about the giant squid. For centuries, sailors have told stories of a giant cephalopod like creature that sucked ships under the water. And for the better part of maybe 5 or 6 decades, we just thought that this was false gibberish. That this was just one of those, oh, it's a deep, big blue ocean, we don't know what lies underneath. Yet, all of a sudden, researchers started to note that there were giant cephalopod like creatures washing up on the shores in the 1960s and 70s. This led to many investigations, which came out to nil, nothing. Well, that is until 2001. A man manning a fishing boat hooked onto something so large he couldn't drag it up. And what he found at the bottom of his line, he saw with a camera, he took several pictures of a giant 8-armed monster of the waters. This then later became to be the first documented footage of a live giant squid. And it wasn't until 2012 we got a video recording of one, where it's now been noted that these are in fact very real creatures that do reside in our various oceans, these 60 plus foot long monsters. And these aren't even the largest ones. There have been accounts of, well, there's the colossal squid, which is larger than the giant squid. And then there's also been an account of an even longer squid, over 100 feet long, that attacked a United States sonar device. And the reason we know how large it could roughly be is because the suction cups left on the sonar device were roughly twice the size of those of the contemporary giant squid, if you'd like to call it contemporary. Now, where this leaves us is, what about other such mythological creatures residing in our oceans or in the forest, like Bigfoot or Loch Ness Monster, Nessie? Well, those all do appear to currently be fiction, or very fictitious in general. Yet behind many of those, well, fallacies, there do lie many realities. If you want to look real close, you could just list off the Gigantopithecus, which was an ape roughly the size of the modern, likely unreal Bigfoot, towering over 8 feet tall, that used to live in North America thousands of years ago. Now, this species of ape is now extinct, however. It does bring up a new segment where you could look into all the different, rather mythical creatures that used to live on this planet. It could, of course, tell you, hey, velociraptors and dinosaurs lived, but I have some more interesting examples that I'd like to comb over of, well, magical realism in our world. the animal kingdom, if you will. For starters, on this earth, there used to be a giant shark spanning over 60 feet long, swimming within the oceans. And this giant shark used to actually battle because we found bone fragment or tooth fragments alongside others with a whale that was even bigger. In fact, this was an 80 plus foot long sperm whale like creature dubbed the Leviathan. And these teeth are so large they don't even fit in your hand. Even older fossil records show some frankly just strange creatures that resided in our various oceans and on land. I mean, frankly, if you don't think that a giant whale with a huge 6 foot long spear on its head, known as a narwhal, isn't magical realism to me, then I don't know what to tell you, because frankly, that's quite magical in my eyes. A swimming unicorn of the sea. Or, if you want to look at even more ancient creatures, a 100 foot long, four legged elephant like thing that would eat leaves off of trees. Frankly, that's all the proof I need that there is magical realism in this world. Of course, I'm not going to bore you with ghosts and ghost stories, because that's just, well, fraudulent stuff meant for TV, to be completely honest. However, I'll leave you guys on that. This has been the 1,000 Minutes of Listening podcast. My name is Luke, and I appreciate you spending 1,000 seconds with me tonight.